This
We are
conference will
trying to
now be
continue
recorded.
This is a collaboration between NEDCO, the Nacogdoches Economic Development Corporation, and your Nacogdoches County Chamber of Commerce. We want to continue to do these business development seminars. For the time being, we definitely want to do these virtually, so as many people that want to attend them can, and also so we can keep them online and kind of build an online learning library for our business community. Today, we're going to meet Dr. Miles Mccall and Bob Hurst. They are two leaders in our community, definitely, and they are two experts about leadership. I know in my time that I've worked for in the public sector, been through my series of crises that most of you guys have seen, hurricanes and floods and now a pandemic. And I can definitely say I can remember when we were led by people who kind of gave a sense of calm and gave a sense of purpose to us. And then there were also instances where maybe somebody who wasn't necessarily the formal leader of whatever organization I was with stepped up, and that person led at a time that we needed a person to lead us. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Claire Robbins to give an introduction to our two speakers. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thanks, Larissa. Good morning, everybody. First, I'd like to introduce Miles. Miles is an innovative professional consultant and speaker. His website is www.milesmccall.com, and he works with businesses and organizations in an attempt to impact people by challenging them to discover and further develop the communication and leadership character in families and individuals. Dr. McCall currently serves as Executive Vice President of Communication for Commercial Bank of Texas, with branches in Nacogdoches, Lubbock, Diboll, Wells, Kennard, Bedford, Louisville, Allen, Elkhart, Roxton, Palestine, Emory, Alba, Cushing, and Farmersville, Texas.
Woohoo! Got them all.
Yeah. Now say that fast. Prior to joining the bank, Dr. McCall served almost 30 years in higher education as a professor and vice president at Stephen F. Austin State University, and then president at Lon Morris College. He also served as a member of the graduate faculty at SFA. As a faculty member, he was named the Outstanding Faculty Member of the Year and won the prestigious Teaching Excellence Award for the College of Applied Arts and Sciences. Miles earned his PhD in the area of curriculum instruction, training, and development at Texas A&M University. He has a master's degree in communication and administrative services and a bachelor's degree in communication and psychology, both from SFA. He also attended graduate school at the University of Houston, Clear Lake. Dr. Miles Mccall has published dozens of articles in a wide range of professional journals. His story, The Family Intersection, was featured Where the Heart Is, Stories of the Home and Family. In addition, his story, My Loss is Your Gain, Parenting Lessons from Death, was featured in Reverse Mentoring, What My Students Taught Me, and his training book entitled The Power Parent Taking Corporate Management Home generated sales in Hong Kong, Indonesia, Canada, and the United States. And his book, True Merit Character, was adopted by a national fraternity as a college-age training curriculum. Miles has served with numerous civic organizations. Some examples include President of the JCs, United Way Vice President, Boys and Girls Club Director, Rotary Board Director and President-elect, Wesley Foundation Chairman of the Board, National President and Chairman of the Board for the National Alpha Chi Omega Fraternity. He was also a director and served as president and chairman of the Texas Lyceum Association, an association of Texans whose purposes are to identify and develop the next generation of top leadership in the state of Texas, to educate its directors regarding major issues facing Texas, and to promote an appreciation of the responsibilities of stewardship of the values, traditions, and resources of Texas. And then Robert Hurst, I'm going to give you guys all these initials past his name: CPE, CSCP, CHS-IV, CDP-1. He has, or maybe that's CHS4, Robert. Is that
There you
right?
go.
Okay. I just got to calling out initials. The CDP1, he has enjoyed a unique road and background to teaching and consulting on leadership during times of crisis. As a subject matter expert, he has delivered both training and seminars to a variety of groups over the last 30 years, ranging from local to international audiences. His skills were tested and honed as the incident commander of county recovery operations during the Space Shuttle Columbia disaster in 2003, as he interacted with and directed over 5,000 people representing 154 agencies, a time he refers to as the Crisis Leadership Laboratory. Since then, he has continued to share his experience and knowledge with a wide variety of companies and organizations. A graduate of SFA, Robert has numerous national and international certifications and licenses in leadership and crisis-related activities, as well as authoring the book, Leadership When the Sky Falls. So it is my great pleasure to introduce to you Dr. Miles Mccall and Robert Hurst. Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Claire.
Thank
Barbara, when you forwarded that to her, you forgot the part that said edit and pick what you need. Well, it's good to be with y'all this morning. It's kind of weird when you feel more comfortable with the face mask on because you've been doing it so much than you do with one off. It's actually great to see you all full face. You know, as a communication person, it drives me nuts walking around businesses and banks when all you can see is their eyes, because you can't tell if they're mad or happy or sad or, you know, need a hug or what. And so kind of looking forward to maybe eventually we get back to that time when we can people read and be there for each other. But good to have you here virtually. That's better than nothing. And it gives us a way to all kind of connect, even though we're kind of isolated and separated. And today we're going to talk about leadership in a time of crisis. And, you know, it's funny. That sounds like it's something special. Okay, so we got a crisis. So let's talk about leadership in a time of crisis. Well, here's a news flash. Leadership is crisis management. I mean, the reality of it is, if you're a small business leader or president of SFA or the, you know, school superintendent, or, you know, you run disaster relief. I mean, life is full of crises. It's going to happen many times through your career, and it may not be as big as a pandemic that's worldwide, but trust me, it's going to happen over and over and over and over. And if it's not happening to you, then you're probably not pushing yourself enough. I mean, crises happen in business on a regular basis, and so I want to talk about that a little bit. You know, just give you a little more background. What Claire shared with you is great, and many of you I've known for years, and you've known some of the fun challenges and opportunities that I've got to be a leader in the middle of. Mine aren't nearly as glamorous as Bob's. You know, when you got you know, national media, you know, filling the bank parking lot and things like that, but I knew I was going to be in for a neat ride when I got out of college, and the first job I took was for a building company down in Houston, and I thought it was cool because my title was Director of Communication. Now I'm telling you, when you graduate from college and you get you a job, when you've been working on the railroad and hanging on the side of boxcars, and your new title is Director of Communication, you're somebody. I had my little white button down on and all, and I learned a lot in that first job. One thing I learned is that one of my jobs was I got to deliver pink slips to job sites. That's fun. That's great. Because at a construction job site, the people you deliver the pink slips to, they have crowbars and hammers and nails. And most of them don't really care about their record. And they're willing to do whatever they want, no matter what the consequences are. So that first job brought me a lot of experiences. Let's see, I got shot once. I got pushed off of a building once. And then company got in hard times because this was in the early 80s, and the company had a hard time paying some of us. So they came to us and they said, we want to just bring you in as owners. We can't pay you right now. We've had to cut and reduce salaries, but we're going to give you stock and make you an ownership in the company. Now, when you're 22 years old, I thought I'd just hit the jackpot. This is about to be fantastic, y'all. I mean, look at me. I'm just out of college. I got my button down on. I lived through the being shot, and now I'm going to be an owner of the company. And I got 250 shares of ownership in the company. And that's when I began to learn the lesson that when the company began to fail about a year later, and the company ended up having financial trouble and the meltdown in the early 80s, and then I learned that they were going to have to file bankruptcy. I learned that that's when everybody comes after all the owners, and got me some lessons there about how to live through that kind of crisis by the time I was 25 years old, and so I learned a lot in that. I watched people make mistakes. I tried to learn from them. I knew that it happened for a reason, and that eventually I was probably going to, unfortunately need to use those lessons down the road. And it happened. I mean, my personal life was kind of tricky and things along the way. Both my parents died when I was in that age period. They died young at 50, and you kind of get left alone. You got to figure out how to do some things, kind of plodded along. Many of you know my opportunity and challenge when I was president of a small college, that I went there knowing it was a struggle. It was near death when I got there. I knew first week on the job, the board chairman called me in and said, "Here are the keys to the car. I don't know how you're going to make your first payroll." And I knew that that was going to be a challenge. And through that, learned a lot. Then as a consultant, I got the ability to go in lots of different companies. Most of the time, they were companies that were either struggling with their management and leadership, or they were companies that had merged or acquired another company, and they were having a hard time coming together. And so those kind of things gave me an opportunity to practice leadership in a crisis, because trust me, when your company's bought by another company, it may not show up on the front page, but it's a crisis. Everybody in that company wonders, do I keep my job? And are they going to keep this division? Are they going to shut down? So it's pretty challenging. And then, as I plodded along and got it into the banking business, I mean, there we were on the other end of the stick, where we're actually going out and we are acquiring banks. And so now I'm on the other end of it. I'm trying to convince those people that are going through that crisis because their bank sold their location to another bank, us. How do you get those people through that? How do you get that community through that? And so those were experiences that just, helped a lot. And then here we are in a pandemic. I think we all know this. My grandma and my pawpaw used to talk about living in the Depression. Well, I'm pretty sure when we're all really, really, really old, we're going to sit around talking with our grandkids and our great-grandkids about living through the pandemic. These things don't happen but about every 100 years, and I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to make the next one. So I think we'll be sitting around and talking about it. And even in my community service, like many of y'all, president of the JCs, trust me, that's crisis management every day of your life. When you're running a group of young men that are 30 or 35 years old that want to save the world, and they're getting after it, and I don't know, they might be throttled up a little bit. Some of them might even drink every now and then. And that's back in the days when we actually lit the fireworks off one firework at a time with a cigar by ourselves. I mean, that's crisis management. Trust me, it's coming. Then I spent time as a national fraternity president. Now there's a winter job. That's pretty cool. As a volunteer position when the pay is zero and you got 250, households of, 70 or 80 young men that make JCs look like, actually stellar citizens. Every time the phone rings, it's bad, probably, because we do unfortunately deal in that world with a lot of challenges, death and injury and things of that sort, a lot of legal aspects of it. And so, man, you take all that stuff and you put it together, and it begins to, even if you're not the brightest light in the, light bulb, you're like me, you learn it. And I think every one of us is going to come out of this pandemic knowing a lot more about ourselves and our leadership ability than we did going into it. So the bottom line is life is a crisis. get used to it. We actually have a program here at the bank called Emerging Leader Program, where we take our young aspiring leaders and we kind of put them through a meat grinder and set them up. And last time we had a group of them, we had a mock press conference, and they didn't know it. They were planning for a crisis, and we said, well, let's take a break. And when they opened the door to the room, we had the halls lined with people, and we took them down and we stood them in front of cameras with lights on, and we began to just pound them with questions. And it wasn't pretty, and they didn't like it at all. And in fact, we got some pushback that that's not how it's ever really going to be. And it's funny, one of those emerging leaders caught me in the hall the other day, and they said, man, well, we've been going through the last 8 weeks with this pandemic, makes that little press conference look like a candy in a candy store. I mean, it's coming if you're going to be a leader. And so I want to visit with you, kind of back into it today. The bottom line is there's things you should have done to be ready for this pandemic. And unfortunately, I bet a lot of companies across the nation didn't do those things. Well, it's too late, but we got to live in the moment. And if you look at the word crisis, some of you have heard me tell this story before. I mean, if you go back and look at the history of the word crisis, back to like hieroglyphics, it's two pictures put together that represent the word crisis. And if you break those two pictures apart, one of those pictures means danger. And the other picture means opportunity. And so what a crisis is really and truly is a dangerous opportunity. And depending on how you handle yourself in that crisis, you're either going to come out on the danger end and be hurt or damaged or lose, or you're going to come out on that opportunity end and be better, be stronger, know more, be better prepared for the next time. Albert Einstein said, out of clutter, find simplicity, and from discard, find harmony. And in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity. And so let's back into it a little bit. I'm going to end my part in a minute by telling you what you should have done, but that ain't going to do you any good today. Let's talk a little bit about what you can do right now with your businesses. What can I do today? A lot of times people panic. They start jumping every way they possibly can. You turn the TV on, and I can, depending on what channel I watch or what article I read, I can find a yay and a nay argument about everything. Does social distancing work? Does the mask work? Is it the right mask? Can you have people in your business? Should your business be closed? I mean, you name it. Can you catch it a second time? I mean, you can go down the list, and whatever argument you want to make, you can find somebody that's going to be on your side. A lot of times it's easy to get caught in the middle of the crisis and forget that you've got a job to do. You need to be able to, for a minute, say, you know what, I'm going to block that out, and I'm going to figure out what do I need to do for my business, my employees, my customers, my community, my organization that's going to make it be able to get across here. Because you can still do something right now today. If you've not lifted a finger yet, today you can decide, you know what, I can help my organization more than I am in this moment in time. Now that's whether you own a small business and you're talking about your 5 employees, or you're Dr. Gordon with 1,500 employees, or you're the chairman of the committee at the church leadership council, or you're worried about your Boy Scout troop. I mean, all of those things have leaders that need to respond in the time of a crisis. So the first thing you need to do probably is you need to clarify your expectations. What can you control? Quit wasting your time on things that you can't control. Here at the bank, we sat down early on and said, okay, what do we got to do? And we came up with, we want to keep our employees safe. Can we do that? Can we have an effect on whether our employees are safe? We can. That's an easy thing for us to target in on. We thought about our customers. Do we want to be able to serve our customers still? We did. We want to retain the customers we have. We want to even maybe get customers from a competitor that maybe aren't being taken care of during this crisis. Can we do something about that? You bet we can. So we began to think about things like that. What are our expectations of things that we can control during the middle of this crisis? And so you need to do that with your business. You need to do that with your civic organizations. You need to sit down and say, okay, it's a pandemic. It's a crisis. It's a horrible time we're in. So what? What pieces can I control? Get a hold of 2 or 3 of those pieces so that you can feel good about it, so that you can feel like you're accomplishing something. Because if you just wallow in the crisis, every day you're going to get up a little more down. You're going to get up a little more depressed. And when you start to kind of clarify those expectations, then you can add to those. Like you can look at, do we have new delivery methods? Do we have a new product or service that we might be able to roll out during the middle of this crisis that we've never done before? We can only do so much, but what can we do really well? I mean, Ford Motor Company made a change and went to respirators. You've been able to drive up at the Sonic restaurant forever and not get out of your car, roll your window down and order and roll it up. That was their business model. They've been able to hit home runs in the middle of this. But look how many other restaurants said, you know what, we can change our delivery method. We put a big tent out at the parking lot at Chick-fil-A. We can say, drive up to parking space at number 1, number 2, or number 3 at Casa Tomas. I mean, we can do those kind of things. And so what you're seeing there are people that said, I'm going to come up with things I can do, and then I'm going to start doing them. So first thing you got to do in a crisis when you hadn't planned appropriately is you got to stop and you got to clarify, what can we do? What are the pieces we can control? And then you got to start controlling them. Now, the second thing you do after you got those expectations, you got to measure that performance, not your whole business plan. You got to measure that performance on those clarified expectations. You got to be nimble. You got to pivot. I went to a restaurant in town because I wanted to support our local community early on. And I drove up and they had, somebody out in the parking lot and there were cars piled out into the highway. And I mean, it took me 20 minutes. And I thought, well, I want to support the local community, but I live in Nacogdoches for a reason. I don't wait in lines. If I want that, I go to Dallas or Houston. I won't shop local. Well, I drove by that same business, several weeks later, and I noticed they had cones out in the parking lot. And I noticed they had multiple lanes. And then I drove by that business a couple of weeks later, and I noticed that they had big tents in the parking lot. And then I drove by and I saw they had new gadgets, and I thought, I'm going to try it again. And I went through there, and I was in that line about 10 minutes. And they had it down to a science. You never touch anything. You put the card in, you pull out, you sell multiple lanes, you go over here, you go over there. And you could tell what that business had done is they've been measuring their performance, and they said, great, we have a new delivery model, but we're not getting enough customers through. And they were able to be nimble and pivot and be able to change. We've done the same here at the bank, y'all. I mean, luckily we were set up. We have drive-throughs. We've got communities that have more cases that we've had to lock the lobbies down. We've got some locations where you call a number when you drive up, never get out of your car, and we let one person in at a time, or we have an employee that masks up and goes out to your car and serves you in your car. We have locations that you just go through the drive-through and they make an assessment of what you need, and if we can take care of you there, we can. And we've had to change all of those locations regularly based on the feedback and the productivity that we're getting out of those folks. We've been able to send people home with computers and VPN and work from home, and we watch and look at those computers. We're able to monitor, are they working when they're at home? And if an employee is productive, man, they're home runs. If they're not productive, then we need to take that computer away and we need to try another employee, because what we need at home safe are the employees that can be productive from that environment. Some people are good at that, and some people aren't. So you measure that performance, not because you're trying to keep up with your usual business plan. You measure that performance to say, are the changes we're making working? It's little bitty measurement. And then you got a third thing is you got to honestly sit down and discuss your progress. You got to talk about, is this really working? Communication is key. You need to talk to your customers. You need to talk to your employees. You know, we're fortunate, we're big enough that we monitor social media, we make changes, we go out to that social media, we see what people say. We got a guy that just spends time all day long looking at that and posting comments and things like that. We have a bank-wide call every Tuesday morning. We get on the phone and we talk about what's going on with COVID. At first, we did it every week. We do other topics too, but for about 6 weeks, we did nothing but COVID-19. You know, we ask our employees what would make you feel better, more safe. We saw other businesses that were doing things. We called other bankers. We communicated with our competitors and our community partners, and we began to fumigate our buildings and make our customers feel better, make our employees feel better. You know, we bought the equipment. We trained people to do it ourselves because we learned that our employees said that'd make me feel better. And if the employee feels better, then they're better equipped to serve our customers. We had employees that said, we want splash guards. You know, do I want to buy splash guards? No, we don't want to do that. But did we? You bet we did. We did that because it would help customers feel better. You know, it's funny. We used to go to the airport and we walked in and we got our ticket and we said hello to the nice little person sitting there. They didn't even do a metal guard. And then after 9/11, think of what happened in airports. Think about, you know, TSA pre-approved didn't exist. We were all TSA pre-approved. You got a driver's license, you get your ticket, go on into the airplane. But after 9/11, things progressively changed, and we learned that we had to go through body scanners and we had to take our shoes off. And, you know, I'm still old enough that irritates me, but my kids don't know any different. That's how the airport's always been to them. Well, you're going to walk up at Lowe's 10 years from now, and you're going to pay through a splash card. And you're going to go places in certain businesses that the model changed forever because that's what people are going to want. And you need to have those honest discussions, and you need to cuss and discuss, be honest. How are we doing? Do we need to do more? Can we do less? Because it's a fine line. None of us got this right. Promise you. We all made mistakes. But an organization that is clarifying those expectations and seeing if they work quickly and honestly discussing the progress is an organization that's going to come out of it better at the other end. Now, let me back up one more step. You should have been ready when the pandemic came. And you say, well, how did I know a pandemic was coming? Good organizations have plans in place that they pull off the shelf with a set of procedures no matter what happens. You know there's a chance there's going to be some kind of pandemic. You know there's going to be a chance there's a fire in your organization or facility. You know that there's going to be a chance that you have a loss of key men, a car crash where 2 or 3 of your leaders are critical or in the hospital. These things are coming, y'all. They shouldn't catch you by surprise. You know, some of you have heard me talk about my little planning strategy of think it, write it, talk it, and do it. When this pandemic is over and you get back to normal, you need to do something to be ready next time. I'll give you an example. You know, we have a pandemic plan here at the bank. Of course, we have Tim Leonard. Tim Leonard thinks of every crisis that could possibly come and has a way to protect us for it before it ever gets here. And we might, you know, think, oh yeah, that'll never happen, but I can't tell you how many times we've gone over to the bookshelf and pulled the plan out for when that crisis comes and began to implement it. And so we actually have in place from years ago a pandemic procedure. We thought about, what do we do if we lose 20 or 30 or 40% of our workforce? What do we do if our lobbies are closed? What do we do if we can't even use a drive-through? And so we thought about that. And when we did that, we began to make notes. What resources will we need? How will we divide our responsibilities? Who's going to be in charge of what? So now when a pandemic comes, we were able to pull that plan off the shelf because we wrote it down. We didn't just have the discussion, we wrote it. We had marching orders just in case something like this happened already out there. Are they perfect? No, but it gave us a place that we were familiar with. It gave us a place to start rather than just being in the panic mode. Promise you, when Bob has gone in to manage a major crisis, he didn't just shoot from the hip. There were already processes and plans in place. He knew some of the things he would have to do. And so we sit down and we talk about that plan. I'll give you an example. We practiced pandemic management once a quarter at this bank. We take the executive team and we go into the boardroom and we take key men, employees, and we bring them in and we say, okay, here's today's exercise. And we say, today we're going to say that there's a pandemic disease. Today we're going to say there's a fire in our corporate headquarters, and we actually sit at the table and figure out how would we walk through this. So from that, we knew that we would send some of our workforce home to work from home. We had computers staged. We were prepared and ready so that when the pandemic did hit, we did the fourth thing. You know, we could just do it. We went into high gear pretty quickly. Did we get it right always? No, we didn't. But if you aren't ready for the next crisis, you're going to waller in the crisis like some people have had to do this time. You know, if you sit around and you say, I see no evil, I think no evil, I speak no evil, if you just sit there and you practice doing nothing, then when that crisis comes, you're going to be really, really good at doing nothing. So next time, when we get back to normal, work on that tool or those tools that help you be ready for the next crisis. Think it and write it and talk it and practice it. You know, everybody says practice makes perfect. Well, that's unless you're practicing the wrong things. I mean, if I'm a golfer and I go out here to the golf course and I got a horrible swing, but by golly, I go out every day and I keep practicing that horrible swing, then guess what's going to happen? I am going to be perfect at a horrible swing. So next time, let's practice management. Let's practice crisis. Let's practice leadership in a way that doesn't make us horrible at our swing. Bob?
Thank you, Miles. I guess you've seen the way I play golf, because that was speaking to my very thing that jokingly I told my son, and there's a story behind it I won't tell now, but if you ever want to know why I don't play golf still, it has to do with that. And that was the time that I learned what a mulligan was, a do-over. I used to take lots of mulligans when I was on the course with my oldest son. But folks, I want to tell you, we're in a mulligan moment right now, because the neat part, you know, Miles has done an outstanding job here at really talking through what it's like to go through a crisis from a leadership standpoint. But what I want to add there is we're in that mulligan moment right now. This means we get a chance to have a do-over as leaders within our businesses and within our communities. And we're all there. I'm there. I saw my entire consulting and speaking business out in the public basically dry up in 10 days. So I am in that mulligan moment. And many of the things he's mentioned, I've already had to deal with, and many of you are dealing with. And we're going to get into what you can do now. I want to give you what I call the 3x3 matrix of things that you can do. And when you get off this call, you need to take what we have talked about and you need to make them actionable items for you. The first item is to recognize what's going on. Now, we've talked on that. Everybody says, oh, wait a minute, we're in a pandemic. I know about that. But have you acknowledged the reality of the current circumstances? Because I personally, as I have interacted with people, am surprised at the number of people that keep saying the phrase or some variation, oh, I can hardly wait till we get back to normal. The old normal's gone, folks. Zip, out. It's dead. What you get, though, is an opportunity to reset what the new normal will be for you. And you do that by just taking on the times and saying, here's what it is. Let me tell you what a good leader does in times of crisis. You define the reality for your team. And I have seen leaders define very poor realities. I've seen leaders define realities of hope. Peter Drucker once said that a time of turbulence is a dangerous time, but its greater danger and its greatest danger is in the temptation to deny reality. So it's okay to sit down and say, I'm struggling as a business. Here's where I am struggling, and you get it there. But then you say, all right, what I'm going to do is not just look at the current situation. I'm going to acknowledge the challenges that I have, and you begin to look out. Maybe you're just trying to survive this week, maybe 2 weeks, a month, 3 months. What does next year look like? This is where we get into something that's very interesting. I learned a long time ago called the Stockdale paradox. If you've never heard about it, you need to Google it. It's by it's about Admiral Jim Stockdale, and a man named Jim Collins wrote about this in his book called Good to Great. Stockdale was a United States military officer who was held captive in Vietnam for 8 years. He was tortured over 20 times by his captors. So in reality, he had every reason to believe he would never survive the prison. But it's very interesting. He said he never lost faith. He said, I never doubted not only that I would get out, but also that I would prevail in the end and learn from the experience and turn it into the defining event of my life, which in retrospect, I would not trade. And therein is the paradox. He had remarkable faith in the unknowable, but he always noticed that on the other hand, those that did not survive the prison were those that were pure optimists. And he said the reason was they were the ones that would say, we're going to get out by Christmas. In other words, we're going to go back to the old ways by Christmas. And Christmas would come and nothing would change. Well, we'll be out by Easter. We'll get back to the old normal by Easter. Well, didn't happen. And over a period of time, they would give up and die of a broken heart. What the optimists failed to do was simply to confront the reality of the situation. Here's where we are. It is what it is. Now let's move forward. And we move forward by saying, here's what's coming. But part of that recognized phase two for you as a leader is to become acutely aware. Now you're going to say, what do you mean acutely aware? I mean aware of everything. Aware of yourself, aware of your team, aware of your thinking. For instance, in your thinking, absolutely do not let yourself get into scarcity thinking. That causes us to pull back. Oh my gosh, it's going to all collapse tomorrow. My business is going to die. My family's going to be starving and hungry. I guarantee you, there's a verse that says, as a person thinks in his heart, so are they. And folks, that's what's going to be with us if we're not careful. Because what that does is that puts us in a mindset of playing to not lose, when really what we need to be doing is we need to be playing to win. This is the time. It's like, okay, the slate is clean. You get to change a lot of things if you want to, kind of like Miles was talking about. So play to win. Put your mind every day getting up going, okay, what can I do to win today? You need to be aware of the emotions that you have, but also the emotions that are within your team. Be sensitive to that. Don't let fear drive the boat within your company. And that means being very careful of the inputs that you're going to allow into your brain. I mean, stay informed as necessary, but don't, let me just put it this way. Don't plug into the national news media, any of them, period, and just stay on that 24 hours a day. It'll make you want to jump off the train moving real fast. And that does not come up with a good ending. But what you can do is say, what are the facts for the day? All right, I've got it now. Let me go and see what I can do to make the day great for my company. And in the middle of all this thinking, also remember your resources. How can you leverage the resources that you have at hand right now? And don't overlook anything or anybody. I love what Larissa said. It was something very interesting that I noted during the Shuttle Columbia incident. That did turn into a leadership laboratory in life, because what would happen is, starting the Saturday night of the incident, for those of you that are old enough to remember that, I realize there's some here that was something they heard about. Yeah, laugh. Miles, you can laugh. You're old enough. But at night, starting on that first Saturday night, I would go home and I had a series of questions that I would ask myself. What went right today? What did not go well? If I could change something today and do it over, what would I do? Now, with those first three questions in mind, what would I do tomorrow, particularly if I had an unlimited budget? Knowing I did not have an unlimited budget, but what that did was that freed my thinking up. And then finally was the question of, what questions have I not asked that I need to be asking? Very, very important question there in the midst of everything. One of the questions, in the midst of that, what are the questions I've not asked? I began to realize I wasn't asking who were the real leaders within the organization as this disaster expanded exponentially. I mean, at one point, I was looking at it the other day, I think it was 32 different agencies all represented in a room. And when you bring multiple people in, we had 120 people in a room that was regularly, that were there regularly every 2 hours. It was designed for maybe 35. So you can see the pandemonium that it could have been like. But what was key was not the leaders that came in representing their agencies. It was the ones that I began to see rise out of the organizations as they begin to apply the very things we're talking about. And as leaders, they had influence. By the way, that means all of you are a leader. You have influence somewhere, either within the community, within your clubs, even within your family. You better. That makes you a leader, because somebody's looking to you for your response and your reaction. So a good leader in a time of crisis is going to nail down and recognize what's going on and become acutely aware. But the second thing you need to do is to reassess where you are, because that means reassess several things. For instance, within your business and maybe even within your life, but let's talk business right now. What are your current conditions and vulnerabilities? Let me give you some questions that you could ask, probably need to be asking. You may have in the back of your mind, I recognize that, but if you're taking notes, these are good ones for you to sit down and say, okay, have I really nailed this down? For instance, how long can I go before I have to lay people off? Have you looked at your cash flow? Have you visited with your banker? Have you looked at accounts receivables? Another question is, can I handle critical projects if everyone is working from home? Miles and them have done an outstanding job. I visited with him about this. I've talked to other organizations that it has been just awesome to watch them take their people home, work from home, and do superlative jobs. I have spoken with a couple where it has been a bit more of a challenge, because there would be critical projects. They were a little bit behind on some of the technology on how to get teams together. Gee, I talked to one guy yesterday. He is vice president of an international ministry. They do regular meetings with over 55 people. When I say regular, at least twice a week, covering 2 nations. And they do it using a technology that helps them do it pretty seamlessly. And here's the neat part. He could speak to me very fluently about the pros and the cons of about 3 or 4 different meeting technologies. Hey, we need to be doing that. We need to be doing that more often, not the technology, but asking, hey, what's working for you, Miles? What's working for you, Larissa? What's not working for you, so-and-so? And then we begin to bring that back into our business, and we say, all right, if we have a critical project, here's how we're still going to be able to get it done. Another question is, can you deliver that product or service virtually? I know that that's what I'm working on doing. I know of a number of consultants and businesses that are now saying everything down to the in-store experience. If you read the case behind Bed Bath & Beyond, who just announced last week the closing of 200 stores, and my wife wept when she heard that, afraid that the area one might go away. But when you read the case study, they said, no, we're not looking to shut down, but we have looked at the metrics. There's that measurement piece that Miles has already mentioned. And we already see our customers shifting more to online. So we are going to shift our assets and resources to delivering it virtually. They shop online, we have it delivered to their home, much like we do with other services and businesses. Can you do that? What if people, another question, what if people feel your product is not essential? Maybe you need to rethink the way you package your product, the way you present your product, the unique use for your product. Think in possibilities. And then another, the hardline question is, do I have enough cash to last through this thing? If you don't, that doesn't mean, oh my gosh, shut the door. It means let's identify it and let's see what we need to do. Because once you've identified some of these things, the next step is to begin to mitigate your risk by creating a tiered response. This is the most critical, next most critical, etc. And you begin to do that. Now, those are all can be kind of negative things, but really they lead to wonderful opportunities. And that is what you need to do next is explore those opportunities. Things like, well, and let me stop here and say, before I say you need to, this is where you get the village together, whether it's your team members, your business leaders around you within your crew, maybe if it's even people that are outside or key customers, and you say, hey, we're just going to do maybe an ad hoc mastermind group, and the subject is, how can we grow from this? What can we deliver? What new product? What new service? And this is where you begin to think about, okay, how can I do more with less? In other words, with the assets that I have, how can I leverage to get all of this done? How am I uniquely positioned to help my customers in a way that maybe the competition is not, or something that sets me in a total category by myself? And you begin to explore this and open up. Now, so that you'll know, this is a factor that has carried across every tenet of leadership and crisis leadership that I've ever worked with. In the Shuttle Columbia disaster, I keep going back to that because that was a huge, massive one. One of the neatest things we did was we would begin to ask the question, is there a better way to do this? And we would get a lot of the line people, the people that were out there, boots on the ground, saying, what do you guys have? What are your ideas, etc.? And they would come up with great ones. I mean, we had some awesome things that came out of it. As a matter of fact, at one point, I am going to tell this one story about Nacogdoches because I was so proud of us. We kept having federal officials come through our EOC starting about day 4. They would visit our EOC. We would show them what we were doing. They would sit through one of our briefings, eat our food, and go away, and I would never hear from them again. So I asked my liaison officer, who was attending the federal briefings twice a day in Lufkin. Now remember, we're doing briefings every 2 hours. I said, are we making them angry? Are we upsetting them? He just died laughing. He said, you haven't figured it out, have you? And I said, obviously not. I wouldn't be asking. He said, I sit in those briefings. I'm here in your briefings. They're coming over here and figuring out what you guys are doing in this explore the opportunities mode, where you get these great ideas and you begin to test, implement them. He said, then if they work, they're going back down to the big briefing and they're saying, oh, I have this wonderful idea. And he said, it's all I can do not to stand up and go, no, Nacogdoches had a wonderful idea. But it was only because we as a team said, where can we get the best ideas? Now, this next part is going to rub some people because it means to make a plan after this, a read my lips, written plan. Now you're talking to the guy who loves to think on his feet, loves to think on the run. I love to do that. I detest writing, but let me tell you something, folks. In 40 years of disaster and crisis work, I've learned you better have it in writing. And the reason is there's so many little rabbit trails you can accidentally run down that will take you off course. My oldest son is a Marine Corps pilot, certified pilot, and I asked him one time, I said, if you take off at Pax River, Maryland, Patuxent River Naval Air Station, Maryland, and you're flying to San Diego and you get off course by 1 degree, out of curiosity, how close to the airport are you by the time you cross the country? And he said, Dad, we wouldn't even find the airport by the time we got there. It would be nowhere in sight. And it drove home the point that if we don't have it in writing, it's going to be very, very easy to get off course. The other thing writing does is it makes us think the plan through. It makes us think down to some of the minutia and some of the smaller points that we need to make certain that we address. And all you're doing when you're doing this, it's not something you're going to put in concrete and dry and say we can never change. The plan then becomes your map. I'm starting here. I want to go over here to the finish. This is the route that I have chosen so far. But if something happens and I intentionally decide to take a little bit of a detour because of maybe some new assets you get, money infusion, maybe a challenge, maybe a new customer, fine, you can take that slight detour, but you still have the map to say, here's where we are going. So you recognize, you reassess, and then you get to this final part, you respond. Now, this simply means you take the plan that you have and you make your guided choices based on your plan. There is a form within the FEMA disaster world that has, like a fungus, found its way across the disaster world. And I say that with tongue in cheek because, once again, remember, I'm the guy that doesn't really like written plans. Let's just go do it. But this is a plan, a disaster plan that was done every evening for the next day. And I cannot tell you the number of times that we ended up looking back at that written plan and saying, does this really meet the goals that we had set for the day, for the week, for the month, or whatever? So that's what it's for. See, as a leader, you made some choices before this crisis started. You made choices about your values, the mission of your company or business. You made choices about the responsibilities. You even made choices about potential problems. I love what Miles said. I hate to dogpile on people, but folks, the time to pull the plan or have a plan for a crisis is not once the crisis is here. It's to think it through ahead of time. Once again, it becomes a map. It becomes a reference point, because when the adrenaline hits, you're going to begin to lose a lot of sense, sometimes common sense. But there's some choices you're going to make during the crisis that are very, very critical. Things like the courageous decision, things that have to be done. A crisis is going to take away some options. You're going to have to make some critical decisions that some will be very courageous. You're going to have to make priority decisions. What needs to be done first, then second, etc. We all are having to make change decisions. What are we going to have to do differently? What's it going to take? Jim Rohn said, if someone's going down the wrong road, he doesn't need motivation to speed him up. What he needs is education to turn him around. Well, right now, we're in school. We need to be turning around, and we need to be refocusing, doing some things. We are going to have to make creative decisions. What are my options? How can I leverage off of those options? It's real interesting. I've lived a life of disaster work to the point that, yeah, I found out later I was called Disaster Bob. That's fine. But for me, it's very non-emotional. It's an if-then. And I've always been able to deal with it. Well, I have a family member that right now, the big joke was Pollyanna at one point, and now I keep having to talk them off the ledge, so to speak, because they're like, oh my gosh, and they really do get to see some financial data out there that is very distressing, etc. And I keep saying, but look at it and say, what are the opportunities? I can tell you one thing is about everyone on this call right now. That's true of everyone. You so far have made it through 100% of the crises that you've ever faced. And we're going to make it through this one, but we have to make good choices. And we make those choices based on our written plan. If Miles didn't make it clear, let me. Communicate, communicate, communicate. When you start responding, you cannot over communicate. Now, it needs to be effective communication that's very reality based. Folks, you cannot argue with reality. You're going to lose 100% of the time. But you can say, this is not the worst crisis we've had, and we're going to get through this. You give hope. There have been a number of instances that I've been involved in where the first thing I would say is, I literally would step in and I'd say, everybody stop, take a big deep breath and let it out slowly. And with a smile on my face, and I say, here's the deal. We're going to make it through this together as a team. Let's roll. And then it's just something about the leader saying, hey, we're going to make it, giving that hope. You've got to do it, though, but you do it based on reality. You need to communicate frequently. The Nacogdoches team, we found out later, was ridiculed behind the scenes by other officials who were said, well, you guys are just John Wayne, y'all are showboats, you're doing these press briefings every 2 hours, you just want to get in front of the press. No, we wanted to keep the press out of our way, and they validated it. I had reporters from CNN, ABC, MSNBC, 2 Canadian stations. There were 5 all total that literally sought me out at some point and said, I understand you're the incident commander. Thank you for doing the briefings like you have, because we have a job to do. And by communicating to us frequently, we could do our job without getting in your way. Now, that has nothing to do with us as a business, except that your people are like those reporters. They're going to try to figure out what's going on. They're going to fill the gaps with whatever. So let them know the facts and do it frequently. That still means, though, we need to communicate with care. Remember, words have power. So does body language, facial expression, the way we use our voice, the timbre, the tone. You don't come in and say, it's going to be okay, I think. Probably not the best way to communicate it. So communicate with care. Always communicate by putting we in the picture. This is not an I thing we're going through. This is a we. We're all in this boat. So let's all work together to plug the holes and keep moving forward. And that means we also communicate hope. You know, Winston Churchill said often, he said, courage is going from failure to failure without losing your enthusiasm. And look how well he did before it was over with. The final thing you do, once you've done all of this, you've reassessed, you've recognized first, you've reassessed, you've put a plan together, you're beginning to make choices, you just execute the plan. That means just go do it. George Patton said a good plan violently executed now is better than a perfect plan executed next week. Well, let's leave the violent out, but let's at least get busy executing. I have a new phrase that I'm using for me. It's called prototype, test, modify, repeat. Prototype, test, modify, repeat. And I just keep doing that over and over. I've learned to say, okay, that didn't work, what will work? And we keep going from there. There are 3 words I'd like you to write down then that takes everything that we've talked about. And I learned these 3 words in a story from Sir Bradley Wiggins, who you need to read about him sometime. Brought the British cycling team from a no-win team to a superlative team, and he said he would do it in 5 years when he took the job. He did it in 3. And they asked him later, they said, how did you do it? And in an interview, he said, I did 3 things. First of all, I clarified what was important. That's your first word, clarify. But then once I clarified what was important, I simplified everything down to those important points. Not the squirrel running across the path that would distract me, not the frustration of the moment, but what really counted. And I made it simple. And then every day, and I hate to use this, in every day, in every way, but every day we would try to improve 1% in at least one area. Not 10%, not these goals that are crazy, but 1%. And we would measure that every day. What could we do that would bring 1% growth in some area, whether it was in the equipment we used, the way we trained our personnel, or even down to, this one was fascinating, they made sure that each athlete had the pillow that they slept on the best, and those pillows went to them to the hotels when they would travel. Because a good night's sleep means a healthier athlete means better performance. 1%, and that's all it took. So ladies and gentlemen, we all have a mulligan moment. Here's what I'm hoping. I'm hoping that at the end of this, you're all, if you're not in that hole, you are sitting right on the edge. All you can do is just tap it in, and you're going to be in good shape. It's been my pleasure to be with you in Miles 2, and we're going to open it up now for any questions or feedback or suggestions you would like us to give. Wayne, whoever.
Folks, any questions of Bob or Miles? Not all at once. Stay controlled here, folks.
I just hope and pray Gary Lee can't find the unmute button before the call ends.
Well, if there are no questions, then let me say this.
Hold on. I think I got a few things to say. No, I'm kidding. Thank you, Joe.
You found the button, boys. First of all, let me just take a moment to thank Bob and Miles for this outstanding presentation and helping us to be better prepared for these types of events in the future. You know, one of the things that occurred to me, I was out about a week and a half ago with a walk around the neighborhood with my 10-year-old grandson. And about halfway through the walk, as we were headed back to the house, he turned to me and we were talking about this and that. He turned to me when we got around to COVID and he said, you know, Papa, he says, you know, you never had to deal with this thing. And what he was alluding to is it was like I grew up in a world where there never was a crisis. And his world is different than mine. And I had to remind him, I said, you know, Archer, I said, excuse me, I said, no, I didn't deal with this, but I said, we had things like the JFK assassination and the assassination of Martin Luther King and other crises in our life that we had to deal with. And I said, this is just one of, sadly, a few that you will experience in your lifetime. And it occurred to me, you know, when I get home and thought about that little discussion, we're dealing with several generations in the workforce right now that believe this is the first time a crisis like this has ever been, we've ever been confronted by it. And so the types of preparation and the tips that you guys have shared with us today, some of them are reminders and some of them are new information, and it'll all be helpful. As part of the journey that the chamber has gone through, we made the decision a while back as a staff to attempt every staff person to record all of the changes that we've had to implement since this thing came on the scene. We've got a 15-page document sitting in my computer right now. 15 pages of changes that we had to implement in order to navigate this time and continue servicing our members. So, you know, what you said about, you know, writing down a plan is absolutely critical. And I can't thank you guys enough for your willingness to help us through this process. It's really helpful to all of us. And Larissa, do you have any final words at all? I don't know if Larissa's... If not, anybody else to the good of the order? Anybody else have anything to contribute? If not, I thank all of you folks that took the time to tune in today to be a part of this program. We'll have more programs in the near future here. And again, thank you, Bob and Miles, for your willingness to be a part of the program. Everybody have a great, safe day.
Have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Job well done.
Thank you.